So, connecting to the unlimited. This world is limited. The person by nature is limited, but there is a way for a person to connect himself to what is above our limits. One of the ways to do this is through the imagination. The prophets had an ability to picture Hashem. Humans are limited while the Creator is unlimited. The prophets connected to the Ein Sof, which is Ein Sof in Hebrew means endlessness. The Ein is beyond the end. The Ein Sof of Hashem, which is above the limits of a human being. How can a human who is limited connect to Ein Sof, the Ein Sof Hashem, who is unlimited, right? We try always to imagine, like, how is it to be close to Hashem? How do you be close to something you can't even imagine, right? It's very hard. So one of the ways is through utilizing the imagination in a positive way. This was the greatness achieved by the prophets, who used their imagination to connect to what was beyond the limits. Prophets achieve prophecy through the power of imagination. The greater you power of imagination, the greater you will have a chance to achieve Ruach HaKodesh, divine spirit, and the prophecy. Let us explain this a bit more. We spoke before about the faculties of Chokhmah, the root of our intellect, and Bina, the root of our imagination. Chokhmah and Bina are Kabbalistic terms. One means wisdom or intellect or information, and Bina means it corresponds to the right side of the brain or the left side of the brain.
What's Bina?
Bina is understanding, it's the left side of the brain. On a Kabbalistic level. I don't know, on a scientific level I'm not sure how it works, but I know there's 4 parts, but what I would speak more in the conceptual idea, more spiritual idea. Our intellect connects to Hashem in a different way than we are discussing. With the intellect, a person connects himself to the Chokhmah, and the Chokhmah is endless. Like the information about the universe is endless. So this gives a person a connection to the endlessness of Hashem. But we are currently discussing a different kind of connection to of endlessness, Ein Sof. It's the connection through our power of Bina. Okay? So, let's go explain. We said therefore before that Chokhmah and Tuna, which is the lower Bina, are different in that Chokhmah, wisdom, intellect, gives a person a picture of something intellectual, while Tvuna, Bina, understanding, is to picture an image. Chokhmah arranges information to a person, but it doesn't give the person a picture of it. Tvuna is what gives a person a picture. Now we understand that imagination is essentially giving a person a picture of what is above the limits of the world. So you have the information, the intellect, and your left side, so to speak, of thought allows you to build something. Bina means being, comes from binyan, building. It takes the information and builds something with that information and try to imagine something based on that information. So, okay. The Chokhmah of a person uses one's intellect. It is able to connect a person to the unlimited as follows. A person is able to comprehend a lofty concept a little, and by holding on the little to the concept, it is like he's holding on to all of it. Even though the intellect is limited, the intellect is able to understand a little more each time. The whole entire idea of the intellect is that the person uses his intellect to try to understand something which is unlimited and endless. So the concept can be God, or like wisdom, or anything, marriage, and then you try to understand what it is, but it's much bigger than what you're actually thinking yet. But it's part of your intellect, so it's limited because you're a human being. But with the Bina, the other side, which builds based on the information you have, it allows you to expand and search and imagine and connect. So that's what we say. But with Bina, a person is picturing something. A picture, by definition, is something which is limited. If something is unlimited, it doesn't have a picture. But if it can be pictured, it must be that it is limited. How then can a person picture something which is unlimited? Right? It's a good question. Imagine God's power. it's unlimited. But how can I imagine God's power if I've imagined it with my limited understanding? Then it's limited. Then how can I imagine something that's unlimited with my limited, right? Understand the contradiction? People can go crazy with that. But we don't. This is where imagination comes in. Imagination is the force which expands one's limit. How does this work? The imagination isn't really overcoming one's limits, but what it does is give a person a new picture, something more than before. This is the deep definition of whole imagination. So the real definition of whole imagination is you take something that exists and you expand on it. Almost like a bracha. Bracha is taking something that already exists and expand on it. So we have to be aware of that. Whole imagination is not I'm imagining something new, because that would be absurd. Whole imagination is I'm trying to imagine something based on what the information I was given already, and that's when you know you're on the right track. And that's one of the understanding. You know, people ask me, Rabbi, how come those people they have out of the body experience and they see Jesus, right? Why don't they see Moses? Because they can only imagine things that have seen already. So they saw a picture of Jesus on the cross, or they saw pictures of, well, they have pictures of Jesus everywhere today. Right? Soon they'll have it on Coca-Cola. And it's serious. You have it in the subway, everywhere. So the idea is that it's not that when his imagination, when he imagines something holy and he goes to heaven and sees some things, in his mind, because the intellect has got the information of Jesus, so he's going to imagine Jesus, and he thinks, I saw Jesus, but really it's the same as Moshe Rabbeinu, or Abraham, or an angel.
So it's based on associations?
Right. There's associations. So that's why you have to be very careful. Rabbi Akiva, when he brings his Talmidim, there's a story in the Talmud about Rabbi Akiva who goes in heaven and they meditate and they go higher and higher and higher. And he tells them, what you see is not what you get. It's not America. Rabbi Akiva didn't say that exactly like that. But he means you're going to see things. When you see water, don't say water. Because there you're going to imagine things based on what you have viewed in this world. But there are other things you might not know what it is. But the only way for you to understand it is through your power of imagination of what you already know. So don't say what things are. The only thing that you can be sure is when you see God, you know it's God. The rest, you have to be very careful.
So what if a person makes that mistake?
So he has to be careful. That's why he needs a Rav to help him interpret what he sees.
So that thing that a person, like say for example, a person experiences a spiritual attainment or some sort of a degree. And that degree they don't really understand, but they understand it through associations. Is there a connection between, say for example, a person sees water and the actual thing behind the water that really is the picture?
Yeah. I mean, like for example, sometimes water can be associated with love, or with desires, or with instant change, or purification. So you can see water, you say, it's water, but really it has a different concept. How are you? So, Daniel, Marvin, Alan, Mordechai.
Dan.
Robert G. So yeah, you have, and I mean that's why, and we learn how to interpret dream. What does a snake really mean? When a snake bites you and the dream is actually good, like you think it's the opposite of it should be bad. No, it's good. Like bite me. Right? Where's the snake? Come at me, right? But because we think a certain way and we think, that's no, you understand. You see things in this world that represent things, but it's not exactly the root of what it is. So it's very important to be aware of that. Defining evil imagination and holy imagination. So the question is, how can a person picture something which doesn't exist? If it does exist, and a person is picturing it, then it's not imagination. So why is it considered using the imagination? If a person can't see something, so he imagines it, it isn't total imagination. Total imagination is to imagine something which doesn't exist. Right?
But it's still somehow rooted in truth.
Well, we'll see. But like the question is like, how can you imagine something that doesn't exist? And that's not right. That would be total imagination. But then, how can you imagine something if you never had any reference to it? So, if a person never saw a chair in his life and he imagines how it must look and he succeeds in imagining it, can we say that it's all his imagination? There is some use of imagination here, but it's not total because the chair exists. Total imagination is to imagine something which doesn't exist and tries to picture it. But this begs another question. If imagination is only considered imagination when it's total, then how can it ever be holy? Right? Because we say whole imagination only something based on what already exists. Isn't a total imagination always a lie? So we answer. There are two answers for this. One reason is as follows. If a person imagines something for holiness and he's aware that he's still within the bounds of imagination, then it is holy and proper. There is nothing wrong with this. It is only if the person in his imagination considers what he is imagining to be real, then his imagination is evil. So I'm going to start imagining Hashem. Imagining Hashem is like my king. I imagine a king there on the throne. Who are my servants? Who is going to save my world? Right? So, is it evil imagination or holy imagination? It depends. If I imagine really that God looks like a king with a beard and, like what you imagine like on the movies, then that becomes evil imagination. You can't limit God. That's not God. God is beyond. But you know that God has a concept called king, and a concept called throne, and a concept called master of the world. So imagine it, and you use imagination for that, and you picture that, but you know that it's not real. It's not the real thing, like the essence. Then it's holy. Mm-hmm. And that's why the rabbis were very careful, say, some rabbis hold you cannot imagine anything about Hashem. But some other rabbis say, yeah, you can. But you have to know it's not real. You can help yourself with imagination, but you have to be careful.
It reminds me of something I learned in biochemistry, that there are different models, something called the Bohr effect, which explains a certain thing that the body does. It's not really important with it. But the Bohr effect is a theory, it's not actually what the body does, but it's a model to explain this phenomenon because the body is infinite in what it does. It's so integrated, there's so many things that are happening, but the Bohr effect, or many different theories, propose a model so that through that model we can understand really what's going on and relate to the body in a way that our minds can understand, compared to the infinite state that the body is in, really. So in that sense, it kind of reminded me of that.
Right. Can you make a book with the science and the Judaism going to it? I mean, you should start writing those, because each time you bring a concept from biology and chemical or whatever, don't let it go to waste. Yeah, you have to write it down. So hopefully I see next week you have already some stuff started. No pressure.
5 chapters.
What?
We'll have 5 chapters.
5 chapters. Yeah. For the 5 days of the soul. Okay. So those are the rules for whole imagination. As long as one is aware that it's not real, the imagination is positive and it is being used for holiness. If a person thinks that what he is imagining is actually happening because he is imagining it, he's actually mentally ill. You have to be careful. So it's like the placebo. Meaning, you have to imagine a new reality, right? So how do I know I'm connecting to that reality? So you have to imagine it, imagining it. But that's always the way I understood it. How do I know when I pray and I have that spiritual experience, or how do I know that when I look at the world, God is everywhere? So you imagine the world. Imagine the world. Yeah. Let's say the world has 5. It's like looks my hand. So you might at the beginning imagine something like that, right? But it doesn't match perfectly. So you need the Torah to help you imagine the world the way it really is. When you imagine the world the way it really is, and then you use imagination and transform imagination to be like it really is, then at some point you're gonna see it. You're gonna experience that. That's Neo. I mean, Neo in the Matrix. You know those sort of watch the Matrix? Thank God. A lot of people didn't see the Matrix. I don't know how they live. Anyway, but right. Once you imagine the world the way the Torah shows you, then you're able to put those like 4D glasses and you look at the world and you start seeing things and say, oh, now it works, and that's when we know we have entered the real reality, and you're gonna start see things happening, and then God's hand involved behind things. Still, it is very hard to understand how imagination can ever be whole. If it's not really happening, then why are we allowed to imagine it? Because we still say that what we imagine creates a reality. There's something happening. There's something happening, right? The laws of attraction, the positive thinking. So we're creating something. There's something happening, but is it happening exactly the way we imagine? So that's a bit the question. So that's why the placebo teach you how it takes time. It's not happen in one shot. You have to connect to a real reality meditation and all that. That's what we're trying to work on. So whole imagination is connecting yourself to what is beyond. In all of creation, there are two kinds of forces: a koach, which is a potential force, and the poel, an active force. Reality is a poel, which is active force. Imagination is only a koach, a potential force. In actuality, what we imagine for holiness isn't taking place. It is also something that can potentially happen. It's like that's quantum physics, basically. There's the potential, and he's declaring quantum physics right here. By contrast, when someone imagines for evil purposes, he is saying that it is actually taking place in reality when it isn't.
Hey.
Hey, alright, stay with us, careful.
Stay with us.
Hey.
No.
You joining us?
Yes.
Great, awesome.
Alright. My bad.
No problem. Continue.
No problem. So again, by contrast, when someone imagines for evil purposes, he's saying that it is actually taking place in reality when it isn't. So to illustrate this idea, we know that there are many different ways to combine the letters of the Aleph Beit. We do not know how to combine them, but in potential, there exist many different ways to combine them. We just aren't aware of them and don't know how to do it. In the future, all will be revealed, but a person's imagination can show him all the different potential ways to combine them. Actually, it's very interesting because I read actually today that, yesterday, I don't remember which book, one of the books. I read that the Torah is written the way it is written because of our choices. If Abraham had not decided to become close to God and all that, the Torah that we have would have been written differently. The Torah, all the letters would have been the same here, but it will be a different combination. The Torah is the matrix of our world. So we created history. God rearranged the potential, the quantum physics of the Hebrew letters, which is the energy of creation that makes everything happen, and arranged it based on what we have, the free will and free choice we use. So you make, and that's why in the Torah there's a Torah codes, and if you make a code like end of the world and different dates, and you might have 10 different dates crossing end of time. But because they are all potential here, they are here in potential quantum physics, but the one that is going to happen is the one that human being are going to use for a free choice. And then after the fact, we can see, it's Rabin, killers, the names and everything. So, but we have to understand that's what the Torah is. The Torah gives us, it shows us this is what the world you have created, and this is how we can use it. That's the whole idea that the whole Torah is one long big name of God. The prophets perceives the prophecy through the holy kind of imagination. They would take the holy letters that they received and combine them, forming ideas. They weren't inventing anything new, They were simply collecting and combining all the facts in front of them, forming the conclusions based on already existing ideas. Thus, whole imagination is anything new. The whole imagination isn't anything new. The only thing new here is the way they would combine their information, but they weren't inventing anything from the imagination. They were expanding a potential concept. Like quantum physics, you cannot imagine anything. There is potential here. Based on the potential that already exists, then you can make something happen and be active. So, right. So whole imagination is for a person to connect himself to a place that is beyond where you are. The holy kind of imagination is the power to conjure up images and pictures of something that already exists. This is also known as tsiur, which is to form. The ability to imagine the world to come by thinking about it in a very real sense. And that's why if you look at I have a book here, for example, to teach you. I'm planning after later on to learn about it a bit. It's about meditation, how to achieve some levels of progress. It's a beginner thing. But for example, it takes the letters, the name, right? The same letters all the time, chokhmah, and then it combines all the letters in different ways with the vowels in different orders, and it gives you all the potential combination that you can do with one word, right? It's like you take the table of elements, chemical elements, and you try all the different possible combinations that you can do, all the chemical reaction until you find the Big Bang, so to speak, right?
The only difference between diamond and coal or oil, it's made up of the same thing, it's just rearranged in a different way.
Exactly. So and that's probably the whole idea of the alchemist, where you can take mud and transform it into diamond. They say that prophets could do that because the whole idea. And I've read some of the practical Kabbalah books where they actually tell you, okay, if you want, you can change this into this and this into this. Because the meditation that they do, they take, for example, the word book, B-O-O-K-S, right? I mean, making something of it in English, it works with Hebrew, but B-O-K-K-S. And then you imagine it and you go back, you meditate, go to the root of the existence of that book, which is B-O-O-K-S in the sky, and you rearrange it, and now you have S-O-O-K, and what? K-O-O-B, and you create the cubes or whatever, and which is a new, but imagine, we should have take letters that it's easier to imagine. Hose? H-O-E-S, hose? No.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so you take shoes and transform them in hose because the same letters. Your shoes go to the root of shoes, S-H-O-E-S, and now you go H-O-E-S-E-S, and now you have from hose to shoes. Ta-da! Is it magic? No. It's entering to the essence of things. They understand everything is a combination of things. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. So the sages say the techeles is blue, because when a person sees the blue color, he will be reminded of the sea, which reminds him of the sky, which, techeles is the blue string that you have on tzitzit, right? So some people have it today, some don't. So it reminds you of the blue color of the sea, which reminds him of the sky, which will remind him of the kisei hakavod, the throne of glory, and this will bring one to have fear of heaven. This is clearly the use of imagination. No one has ever seen the throne of glory, but since every person's soul is rooted in the throne of glory, a person can connect himself to this unseen reality by using the holy kind of imagination. And in such imagination, a person isn't coming up with anything new. He's merely combining all the information in front of him and expanding it until he arrives at a greater conclusion of what he started out with. So meaning, he never saw the kisei hakavod like with his physical eyes, but he knows there's something. Kabbalah teaches you, Torah teaches there's a kisei hakavod. So imagine a kind of kisei hakavod, and you go there, and you're actually really reaching a kisei hakavod. You don't know really how you reach, but you understand the concept, and you connect yourself to the concept, to the source energy of that concept. So you don't know what God is, you don't know how it looks, but you imagine there's a power, and by imagining that power, you connect to a reality that exists. Even though it's unlimited, you can use your imagination, which is limited, to connect to the unlimited, because you know it exists.
So wait, you're saying that, okay, so if I meditate and imagine with the way he's describing it, I can imagine the next world while still alive? isn't it when a person dies that they can?
No, you can experience the next world here. You can experience Gan Eden here and the next world. So it says Tzaddikim can live in Olam Haba, in Olam Hazeh already.
So this is for everyone?
Everybody has the potential. You don't have the full thing, but you can already have a taste. But you understand also what Olam Haba is. It's not that just like a world, like tropical, with tropical bird. Ah! And the woman making wind on you. That's more the Arabic style. 70 virgins. No, that's not that Olam Haba. Olam Haba is very different. It's a state of consciousness being. So if you enter that state of consciousness already here, you can. So to summarize, if I am connecting myself to a reality that does not exist, it is evil imagination, because you're connecting something that doesn't exist in potential. It's not here, so you have to know that there's a concept like that. If I am connecting to myself to a reality that exists, just that it is above my comprehension, that is holy imagination. Okay, so in holy imagination is like I'm allowed to imagine God. But I have to know what I'm imagining is not reality. But I know there is a concept called God, it really exists. So I'm allowed to expand and even give images about God, as long as I know it's not God himself, but it's connecting to the concept, then I'm allowed to use it. It helps me expand myself and connect myself to it.
So that I can better relate to it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So now he tries to give some tools on how to strengthen it. Emunah enables the whole imagination, or something also with Master Mike, with the meditation. We see about trying to see the light or to see the energy that we have in there, so that you see the aura. So if you have to believe it's here, and you have to try to imagine it. Once you try to imagine it and you know it's here, then you have the potential to see it. Little by little, you're going to connect to that reality. But unless you imagine it, it's not going to happen in front of you. That's why the people who are very anti-hypnosis or anti all the stuff, they don't believe in that stuff, nothing happens to them. Because they put a filter with the imagination that they cannot experience nothing. Right? So, again, it's our strongest power. How can you live in the world with God if you don't imagine being in the world with God? Right? And Hashem lives as a parallel to you. So you come close to Hashem, he comes close to you. If you will go away from Hashem, he goes away from you. If you look for Hashem in the world, then Hashem is going to look for you in the world, and you're going to find each other. Peekaboo! No, it's real life, right? It's the first game we do as babies. I always find it fascinating when I realize that first game we do as babies is Peekaboo! There's Hashem! It's hidden! Now he's here! And then the next game you play is, when you can start horror-calling and standing up, is hide and seek. Find me, right? The first game Adam played with God in the Garden of Eden is what? Hide and seek. Adam was hiding and said, find me! Right? I mean, it sounds funny, but it's really what happened. We play a game of hide and seek with God. And we love it. We got scared. And boom, find you. Well, I mean, the kids, they love it. Like, such an excitement. I mean, even adults play that with the kids. It's fun. Right? Because our whole life is a life of darkness and light, hide and seek, light and shadows, right? Actually, the whole thing of... Is your phone? Oh, it's this one. The whole thing of the sukkah. What's the sukkah? The sukkah represents Gan Eden, the life the life on the spiritual level. And how is the sukkah kosher or not? Based on what? The schach, the roof, which has to be made of more shades than light. There's more light than shades. It's not good. But if you don't see the stars and the cracks, then you can't see God. So, right, light and darkness. It's all a game of light and darkness. And your soul is light, and your vessel, your body, is darkness. And the goal is to fill your body with light, and transform your body. That's why it was an amazing thing. The Ramchal said that the goal is not to disconnect from my body. I'm super holy. I don't use my body. No. You have to become like literally like the Neo. That's why I like so much about one part of Neo in the Matrix is that your body has to become spiritual. Your body can be transformed into a spiritual. You were spiritual. Your body of skin was one day before Adam a body of light. It got transformed because of the consciousness that we have, and our soul became, our light was extinguished. That's why actually one of the idea of lighting a candle when someone dies, or on Shabbat, lighting a candle because the woman relight the candle that extinguished by Adam in Gan Eden. I know I'm mixing everything together, but it's all connected. You get high enough, you'll connect. You understand? So right, and you have the light. So meaning that this, like Neo, he realized he's part of the matrix. His body is part of the whole system, and he's transforming himself into light, right? Back to light, back to the matrix, which is the code, the essence. I know it's awesome. Yeah. Okay, Emunah enables the whole imagination. Now that we have understood that we can understand the deeper point in our mind, there is our sechel, intellect, and there is our imagination. Our intellect is based on reality. It proves to us that something exists, even if we don't really comprehend it. If our intellect cannot feel the proof of something, then we cannot connect to the information using our intellect. A person will swear that he saw something only because his intellect has proved it to him, and he's willing to swear over it. Imagination works differently. In the evil kind of imagination, a person imagines something which doesn't exist and attempts to turn it into reality. This is actually the roots of idol worship. Right? So yeah, this power there. Power. And he creates this into a god. You understand? This is not God. Yeah, there is these atoms and energy and photons and electrons, and this has some power, but it's not independent power. The power is rooted from heaven. So you're making this into a god instead of saying, no, it's part of God. Everything is part of God. So you're creating a reality separate from the real reality. That's evil.
So I feel like it's not only. What about the fortune telling and looking into a person's future and stuff like that?
So
a lot of people do that.
Right, a lot of people do that, and a lot of them make mistakes because it's not rooted in pure imagination and pure clairvoyance, right? That's why it says in every dream there's some truth and some falsehood. Because your dream at the end is an imagination, so it can be 100% pure. That's the way we make it. And I think the same thing. When people see things, they see the potential also. They can see, oh, married with this, not married with that. But you have still the power to change your whole future because they can see the potential, but they don't know what you're going to choose. So they see part of reality, but they don't see the whole reality. That's why it's dangerous. Fortune tellers might have some information, they might see things, then it's limited seeing. And if it's limited seeing, you might narrow your mind of your potential, and then you're going to follow what they say because you're thinking like what they were saying, instead of choosing the path that you choose. Like Abraham Avinu, right? So it's very important to be careful with those things. That's the danger of those things. So they see a reality, but it's not the whole reality. It's more of a koach, not as opposed to the poach. So if something is above one's comprehension, then his intellect cannot prove that it exists. So how does a person know that it does exist? This is the role of Emunah. Emunah is what is enabling one to connect to facts he doesn't see. Holy imagination makes use of our Emunah. It shows a person that certain Emunah is faith, right? I mean faith, meaning faith where you're convinced that it's there, right? And the Emunah in Hashem, I'm convinced that there's God here. Not blind faith like in Christianity or other religions. So holy imagination makes use of our Emunah. It shows a person that certain fact exists because he believes in it, even though he has no comprehension of it. If a person can't comprehend a certain concept, how can he connect himself to it? Through Emunah. So I imagine there is a God. But how can you imagine there is a God if you don't understand what God is? So we have emunah, I'm convinced, I feel that there is a God and that it's true. So my emunah enables me to connect, so to speak, to make my imagination become real. Or help me connect to that reality. Okay, one last part, and we'll stop. Having also whole imagination requires emunah. Having understood that, we can speak about another point which results from this. Emunah is the power we have which can shatter boundaries. It is brought in the Sfarim Hakadoshim, the holy books, Kabbalah, that the point where the sechel ends, with the intellect ends, is where emunah begins. Almost you could translate that in saying where philosophy starts, Kabbalah starts. Where philosophy stops, Kabbalah starts. Meaning this. A person's intellect brings a person up until where he can really understand, and the person's emunah is able to take him and connect him to the point beyond his intellectual comprehension. On a deeper note, emunah is necessary in order to shatter any limit. Even a person's chokhmah requires emunah if a person wants to connect to the Ein Sof. Meaning, like, I look at my thing, I don't have money to pay the bills, like, but God said in His book that He will provide with everything I need, but I need to have emunah in Him. So, according to the pure logical way of life, it doesn't make sense. I should be stuck and not be able to pay my bill. But if I emunah really that God says, I'm going to provide with what you need, not what you want, what you need, then God is going to give it to you. How? You don't know. Imagination, but you have to have emunah, and somehow it's going to happen, right? So that's really what's happening here. On the deeper note, emunah is necessary in order to shatter any limit. Even a person's chokhmah requires emunah if a person wants to connect to the Ein Sof. When a person understands as much as he possibly could, he has reached the end of his chokhmah. He believes that really his chokhmah is deeper than what he actually comprehends. So he uses his emunah to connect to what is beyond his comprehension. This is essentially because a person believes that the Torah is more vast than the earth and the sea. He uses his power of emunah to believe that there is more to what he's capable of understanding. And that's because we have the Torah. I mean, if you take a book of theories of the universe, that can be wrong because you don't know if it's true. But what the Torah tells you is true, right? So that's why you can expand very far. If you expand on some kind of theory that is not rooted in the Torah and truth, then it may dangerous. That start to become evil imagination because it's not. You can use emunah for that. You don't know if it's true or not, if it's real. Since all imagination can only work through emunah, and whole imagination goes beyond our intellectual limitations, it is thus self-evident that whole imagination and emunah work together. Emunah is what shatters the limits. And the whole imagination is how a person pictures the information of what is beyond the limits. It seems that emunah and the whole imagination are the same thing, but they're not. Whole imagination is based on one's emunah, step by step. The first step. Sorry, what? Sorry, I might have to answer that one. Yes, hello? Yeah, it's starting in 15 minutes.